U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff has made a big claim on the third anniversary of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. He says the U.S. is nearing a peace deal between Russia and Ukraine. Speaking to CNN, Witkoff said that any potential deal would require both territorial and economic concessions from both sides. He looked back at what he called a cogent and substantive negotiations framed in the Istanbul Protocol Agreement in 2022 and said it can become a guideline for peace agreement between Ukraine and Russia. The New York Times had earlier published copies of the draft agreement, sparking interest in what the agreement entails and its significance. The Istanbul Agreement emerged from peace talks that began in February 2022 in Belarus, followed by a second round of negotiations in Istanbul, Turkey. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov is in Turkey to discuss his country's recent talks with U.S. officials on ending the war in Ukraine and how Ankara can contribute to the process. One of the most significant sticking points in the Istanbul Protocol Agreement was the status of Crimea, since Russia and Ukraine could not reach a mutual understanding regarding the region. The agreement decided to exclude discussions on Crimea for the next 10 to 15 years. Among the other points was Ukraine's demand for NATO membership, while Russia insisted on Kiev's neutrality. Also, there were disagreements with Russia on the size of Ukraine's army. Witkoff has said that Trump wants to be the peacemaking president, but the question is, how? Russia and U.S. teams plan to meet again this week after a meeting last week in Saudi Arabia. Trump has said he does not consider it essential for Ukraine or Europe to be present at negotiations aimed at ending the war.
Europe has failed to bring peace, and Zelensky probably maybe he wants to keep the gravy train going. I don't know what's the problem, but he hasn't been able. He's very upset that he wasn't invited. He could have come if he wanted to, but that he wasn't invited to Saudi Arabia. But he's been working for 3 years. There's never been even meetings or phone calls to stop this war. It's a horrible thing.
Meanwhile, the United Nations General Assembly is set to vote on a text resolution drafted by Ukraine and the EU on the war today, which says it is urgent to end the war this year and clearly repeats the Assembly's previous demands: an immediate cessation of Russian hostilities against Ukraine and an immediate withdrawal of Russian troops. Reuters reported that the U.S. has declined to co-sponsor the text and propose its own resolution for a General Assembly vote, which calls for a swift end to the war but makes no reference to its territorial integrity. Late on Friday, the U.S. also gave the same draft resolution to the United Nations Security Council and is now pushing for the United Nations Security Council to vote before the General Assembly meets. Maybe because the General Assembly, representing all members, has clearly and overwhelmingly supported Ukrainian sovereignty, while the 15-member Security Council has been paralyzed by Russia's veto powers. For all the latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.